Hey everybody, Mark here. Today we're going to talk about human resource management, finding and keeping the best employees. So that said, let's get right into it. So we're going to look at the importance of human resource management and how it acts as a strategic contributor to the organizational success of your company. And we'll look at the 5 steps in HR planning. One of the things I want you to do here is we will talk about this from an HR perspective, but I want you to put on another hat as well. The other hat I want you to put on is one of an applicant, okay? Because you guys will all be HR applicants or applicants for positions before you actually get into HR if you want to be an HR major or get into a company. So if you remember in the back of your head as we're going through this, what it means as an applicant to know about this process. So how can you make your application better if you know about the process from an HR perspective? That's one thing. The other thing I want to tell you about is my own personal bias here. Okay? And one of my own personal biases here is that I love HR. And HR can do so many amazing things for a company. But HR, in my opinion, tends to have a marketing problem, an internal marketing problem. Sometimes the HR department isn't looked upon in the most favorable light inside the company. And to me, that's a marketing issue. HR does some amazing things, but not a lot of people inside the company know about them. Again, a marketing issue. That is my own personal bias that lays over top of our HR chapter here. Okay, so 2 things. First, put on your hat as an applicant and keep that in the back of your mind as we're going through the processes here. And think about what's going on inside an HR department as you are the applicant and applying, and how you can use that knowledge to better increase your likelihood of success. And 2, remember that my personal bias is one that I believe HR has an internal marketing problem because they do so many amazing things, yet very often other parts of the company have difficulty knowing that. Okay, so what else? We're going to look at how companies recruit and some of the issues that can make recruiting challenging. We'll look at the various steps in selecting employees and some of the types of training and development methods we can use. We'll look at employee appraisals, looking at performance and how to summarize the objectives of a compensation program. I personally have written several employee manuals for companies end-to-end, as well as design even more compensation systems. So I have a lot of hands-on experience, quite frankly, that many people who work in HR don't ever get to do in their careers. So I think that's kind of cool that I've actually done many of these things surrounding HR. And again, things I honestly never wanted to do, never thought I'd do when I was in business school. Okay, so let's look at ways employees move around a company. Promotion, reassignment, termination, retirement. There's a bunch of different ways, and we'll look at the impacts of those. And we'll also look at some of the legislation surrounding HR management. So HRM, or HR Human Resources Management, is a process of determining our human resource needs. So first of all, we need to figure out what we need inside the company, and then we need to recruit, select, develop, motivate, evaluate, compensate, and schedule, right? And all this is inside of this part down here, the organizational goals. Okay, what are we hoping to achieve as a company, and how does HR fit with inside of that? Okay, so these are all things that HR has their hand in, HR helps with, or sometimes takes entire control over. So HR management and all these relate back to organizational goals. Certainly recruitment, we need the right employees to help attain our goals. Selection, right? We want to pick the best out of the employees or the potential employees that are coming in. Training and development, we want to make sure that our employees are as productive as they can and having the tools, knowledge, and skills that they need. And motivation, they continue to develop and work in the right direction. Evaluation, how do we know who's doing a good job and who's not? We want to make sure that our compensation and benefits are competitive and fair. HR can help schedule our employees. Very often we have to deal with unions, so employee-union relationships. At the university here, we have several unions. We have the faculty union and we have the support staff union. So we have two major unions at the university, completely different and separate unions with completely different and separate collective agreements. And career management is something else that HR can help with, and that is finding out what our employees' needs and wants are as they move through an organization and gain more experience. Where do they want to go? And can HR help facilitate that? So certainly we've mentioned in other parts that Canada's economy is moving away from manufacturing and more towards service-based and high-tech manufacturing and high-tech things, much more value add, right? We'd much rather make value-added products. And certainly the numbers bear that out from one of the previous chapters. I believe it was entrepreneurship. We talked about the numbers of people who work in the service industry. Okay, so what does that mean? Both for service and high tech, we need highly skilled workers. Sometimes that means we need to retrain workers. Sometimes that means we need to retrain older workers. Right? Sometimes we need to retrain workers who are in their 40s or 50s, sometimes even their 60s. Okay? We do have a shortage of qualified workers in many fields. As a result, the HR department has a much bigger role in playing this. It has a much bigger role in finding the people in the recruiting side. Okay, it has a much bigger role in the retention side. Once we get a good person, we don't want them leaving for another company if it is a skill set that is very rare. Okay, I've mentioned before one of the companies that I started, we had 50 plus electrical engineers. We had most of them, well, my average engineer was in his 50s, had a master's degree, making 100 grand plus a year. And this was 20 years ago almost. Okay. We had one guy who was an analog chip designer. Okay. Even back then, that was a very rare skill set. Digital chip designers were everywhere, and most of my other electrical engineers were digital chip designers or digital software designers or regular software designers. But we needed an analog chip guy. And we went out and recruited one. We found one. We found a good one. We found a guy who was literally one of the top in his field in the world. And he worked for me for years. He constantly got offers to leave. And he worked for me for years. We could not compete with the salaries that he was getting offered. He was getting offered 2.5, sometimes 3 times more than what we were paying. There's no way we could come even close to that. He was definitely one of the highest paid employees in our company. There weren't many people who made more than him. There were 2. The CEO and me, I believe. All right? But we managed to keep him. Here's one of the reasons why. You can always make more money, but money isn't the reason most people leave. There are all kinds of other reasons people leave companies. Money is one of them, but it's generally not the primary one. One of the primary reasons people leave companies is bad bosses. Okay? Like I might have mentioned before, simple advice. If you've had a bad boss, remember everything they did that was awful. When you become a leader, when you become a manager, when you become a supervisor, don't do that stuff. Okay? Relatively straightforward. Shockingly good advice. Okay? So, it is a responsibility of all managers, not just HR, to look at our human resources. We do have a shortage of trained workers, and we have a large number of workers who require retraining. Okay, let's just look at computer languages. How many versions of C are there? C, C++, C++, C+++, C Sharp. We could go on. Okay. We also, in North America, have this baby boomer bubble. Okay. Remember, I'm at the end of it. What's happening is it's getting older and older and older, and these baby boomers are all going to retire at some point. What does that mean? That means there's going to be all kinds of really cool jobs opening up for younger people. Sweet. What did that mean for somebody like me at the end of the baby boom? I had to scrape and claw any good job I could find, right? So, what else? Baby boomers. Guess what? Many of them are hanging around longer than they wanted to. Downturns in the economy have kept them hanging on. In current times, we see a high stock market and a tough economy. That doesn't make sense to me. Okay? I believe there's going to be a reckoning of the stock market within the next year. I've been saying this for a year and a half. Within a year of the U.S. presidential election in 2020, there's going to be a reckoning in the stock market. And I've been saying that well before COVID. Okay? I still believe that. Stock market's high, economy's not doing that well. Okay? What else? We have single parent households and we have two income households. What does this mean? Well, we've seen more women come into the workforce. We've also seen a shift in parental leave. We've seen the laws change such that men can take parental leave. Okay, it's now called parental leave instead of maternity leave. We've seen couples making conscious choices about who works when, about who puts effort into their career at what point. Okay. Career advancement for women is much more at the forefront than it was 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, which is great. And we're seeing more equal or fair partnerships in families where both parents look at what is best for the family as a whole. Okay. What else are we seeing? We're seeing some trends towards more flex time and a shorter work week. That has huge impacts on productivity. I personally have never punched a clock. Ever. When the work's there, I do it. When it's not there, I leave. Sometimes that means leaving at 10 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes that means leaving at 2 o'clock in the morning. Okay? But what we're seeing is a shift towards more work-life balance. People want more time away from work. They don't want to be chained to their job. That has an impact on productivity. That has an impact on career development. Okay? They want to enjoy themselves along the way. Previous decades, you'd work hard for 30 or 35 years, and then you'd retire, and then you could enjoy yourself. Okay? Not happening anymore. People want to enjoy themselves along the way. That's what flex time can give us. I know tons of companies that shorten their lunch break, and then every second Friday afternoon, they take off. Average workplace in some places is now 35 hours. When I started, it was 40. Okay. In a declining economy, what we've seen is a shift away from full-time employees to temporary and part-time workers. How does that affect company morale? We can replace an expensive employee with a much less expensive employee. Let's look at a university, for instance. They just offered early retirement to people of a certain age. Now, if you're a professor and you have a 30-plus year career at a university, and they offer you early retirement, guess what? They can replace you 50-something or early 60-something-year-old person with a 28-year-old new PhD and save tens of thousands of dollars. Okay? Not a bad move. The return on investment in that is pretty quick. And we see it everywhere. The first time I saw it, believe it or not, was actually in the late 1970s when I was a kid. Sears. Sears was a huge department store. And Sears had all kinds of full-time sales staff. And in the 70s, Sears stopped hiring full-time sales staff. Their full-time sales staff that was there, they let stay until they retired or left, and then they replaced them with part-time. Why? Well, again, there were people who worked at Sears for 20 or 30 years. They were making a lot of money for a retail sales job. They were also getting full benefits, retirement package, health, dental. Guess what? Don't have to pay those to part-time employees. Oh, paid vacation. They were also getting paid vacation. Guess what? You pay your part-time employees an extra 4% for their vacation. Okay, it is a lot less expensive to have part-time employees. And we've seen this trend in retail. That's the first time I saw it in the late 70s. Right? There are not a lot of full-time retail sales jobs anymore. They like to keep the managers or the general manager or the head manager as a full-time employee, so they've got some consistency, but then they saddle them with having to deal with employees who are not there full-time. And there's a much bigger cycle of people coming through. What else have we seen? Many jobs are being outsourced to other countries. I think I might have said this before. We want the lowest paid employee who's qualified to do the work to do the work. And if that means it's in another country, it's in another country. I throw in the qualified because, yes, I want the work done properly. All right? Let's look at my hospital example. Can a doctor put an IV in? Yes, doctors are required to learn how to put an IV in. Do doctors do it every day? No. What do doctors do? Doctors do doctoring duties. Who puts your IV in? The nurse or the phlebotomist? Okay. They are paid less than the doctor. So if a nurse or phlebotomist puts the IV in, that frees the higher paid employee up to do the higher paid work. Could the custodian put an IV in? Well, the custodian's probably watched it 1,000 times. Custodian could probably put an IV into somebody. Would you want the custodian to put an IV in you? No. Why? Because they're not qualified. In the same vein, would you want the doctor to put the IV in you? Probably not, because the doctor's probably out of practice. Right? So we want the lowest paid employee who's qualified to do the job, What else about outsourcing? So we've got lower pay. Very often, the labor laws are not as strict. particularly around things like safety or minimum wage. Okay, so more potential opportunities to save money. What else? There's an increased demand for individual benefits that may not be cost effective for the company. Right? Guess what? As you get older, your use of benefits changes. In your 20s, chances are you're pretty healthy. You might not even need glasses. You might not need cavities filled if you brush your teeth. Guess what happens? You get older. You might need medication for something. You might need glasses. Your teeth might fall out. You might need to get cavities, or you might get more cavities. Okay? So, as a young person, maybe you don't want dental coverage. Maybe you'd rather take some money and go towards your gym membership. That's not a bad thing. I worked for a company once that gave us $200 twice a year. So every 6 months you got $200 and you could go spend it on anything sports related. You want a new golf club? You go buy a new golf club. Well, pay for about half of a golf club. Want a tennis racket? You go buy a new tennis racket. You wanted to pay for your gym membership? Pay for your gym membership. As long as it was sports related, you just walked in with your receipt, filled out the form, they gave you your money back, no questions asked. Why? Because if you were doing something sports related, they felt you were living a healthier lifestyle. If you're living a healthier lifestyle, you are less likely to take sick days. You are less likely to be absent. And that was a completely company paid benefit, right? That was also a very young company. Average age was in its 20s. 15 to 1,800 employees. Okay. So, what else have we seen? We have seen a decrease in employee loyalty and an increase in turnover. Increase in turnover costs us money. It costs money to recruit people. It costs money to hire people. It costs money to get rid of people. It's expensive. And the higher up you go, the more expensive it gets. Okay. So what do we have? We have a demand from employees for more flex time, for a shorter work week, and for an increase in benefits, yet they're willing to jump ship. Okay? Do we see the conundrum the company's in? I have a group of employees who are making all these demands, but are not returning the loyalty. Okay? It's definitely a challenge. So, let's look at the process, the HR process. So the 5 steps. 1, preparing an HR inventory of the organization's employees. What do we mean by this? Okay, we mean who do we have and what are their skill sets? Okay, who do we have and what are their skill sets? 2, preparing a job analysis. That means going through job by job and figuring out what actually occurs in that job. Your job is an accounts payable clerk. What does the accounts payable clerk actually do? Okay. Step 3, assessing our future human resource demand. Wow. What does that mean? Well, we need to understand where the company wants to go. How big do they want to get? How much do they want to grow? And as a result, do we have the right HR mix? Do we have the right people in place? How many more people do we need? And what kinds of people? Okay. Well, if we've got job analysis, we know what the jobs are. We've got a human resource inventory. We know what our current skill set is, so we can figure out gaps there. That'll help us figure out some demand. But if we want to grow, we're going to need more of certain people. Well, we can do a job analysis for positions that don't exist as well. And we can figure out how many people we need to cover off the organization's goals. Then it gets even harder because step 4 is assessing the human resource supply. Now we got to figure out if those people are going to be around. Go back to my example of the analog chip designer. Tough guy to find, tough guy to hold on to. Guess what? I made a huge effort to make him feel at home. To this day, every now and again when I go back to Ottawa, to this day, if I run into him, he immediately comes over and says, "Hey, Mark, how you doing?" Okay. Rare guy. Needed him. Wanted him. Okay. What's the supply going to be like? Are we going to need something that's rare? Or is it going to be abundant? And then with that information, we can establish a strategic plan. How are we going to do this? How are we going to go after this? So, job analysis, study of what's done by the employees who hold the various job titles. Already talked about this, right? What does this job actually do? Right? So we look at that. Then very often that leads into what? A job description. A job description is a summary of the objectives of the job, the type of work that needs to be done, the responsibilities and duties, the type of working conditions, and the relationship of the job to other functions. A job spec is a summary of the minimum qualifications required of workers to do a particular job. Okay. Here is a thing about job specifications. Okay, and this is from a gender-based study I read. Okay. Men will apply for a job if they think they meet 60 to 65% of the job specifications. Okay, they will throw their resume in if they feel they meet 60 to 65% of the qualification. In this study, where they looked at the difference between men and women applying for jobs, women want to meet 90% of the minimum qualifications in order to apply for the job. Okay. The bottom line that came out of that is women should apply for more jobs. Okay. I look at it this way. What's the worst thing that can happen? They say no. What's the best thing that can happen? You get the job. But unless you ask the question, how do you know what's going to happen? Okay. So, job analysis, how do we do this? We look at the person who's doing the job. We discuss with their managers, and we can ask people to keep a diary of their activities. From that information, this is for a sales job, we figure out what they do. Primary objective is to sell the company's products to stores in Territory D. Duties include servicing accounts, maintaining positive relationships with clients, and responsibilities include introducing new products, helping the store managers estimate the volume, negotiating prime shelf space, explaining sales promotion activities, and stocking and maintaining shelves in the stores. Job specifications about the person. These are the things we feel the person should have. They should be bilingual, self-motivated, positive attitude, strong written and communication skills. I don't know. I look at that line and I think there's an issue. Strong written and communication skills? Well, isn't writing part of your communication skills? I would say strong written and oral communication skills. Have a valid driver's license, 2 years sales experience, and a diploma or degree in business. Okay, so that is that part of it. So on to recruiting. How do we get the people we need? Okay, let's start on inside the company first. Why do we go inside the company first? Any ideas? Think about it. Why would we want to recruit inside the company? I'll come up with a few reasons. Maybe you can come up with more. 1, it's always nice to promote from within. It's always a good feeling when you see one of your colleagues get promoted or you get promoted. It incurs loyalty towards the company. The downside of that is 3 of us may be vying for one job. So one person's going to be happy and 2 people might become bitter. That's the other side of that coin. Okay. 2, if we promote from within, we already have experience with the person. We know what they're like. They know what we're like. They can be productive faster. There's no culture shock on either side. Okay, very often they can step into a promotion and be productive right away. So we look inside first. It's less expensive to look inside. So where can we get people? Transfer from another department, promote somebody from within. Employees can recommend other people either inside or outside of the company. We can retrain somebody for that job, or we can reorg a department and look at putting different people in different positions. Externally, we can have a whole plethora of places to find people. Private employment agencies, public employment agencies, personal applications, people who just send their stuff in, management consultants, new graduates, universities, former employees, part-time people, competing organizations, unions, advertisements, temp services, trade schools, placement offices, newspaper ads, trade associations, business associations, profs, on and on and on. I got a call the other day. Mark, do you know a recent graduate who could do X for me? Guy runs a Canadian company that manufactures in China and has, I don't know, tens upon tens of millions of dollars worth of business. And he's looking for a very specific type of person. I get those calls on occasion. Okay. Social media, another way, particularly to get entry-level people. Right? So after we recruit, we have a selection process, a hiring process, and an organization and training process. So how do we recruit people? So what is recruitment? It's the set of activities we use to obtain enough of the potentially right people at the right time. Okay. I've already mentioned we tend to go inside first. There may actually be policies inside of the company that we always look inside first. And there may be actual legal guidelines surrounding hiring, especially if there is a union involved. Okay. We need to be aware of that. What else? We need the skill set. We know that. That's the basic level. But also there's corporate culture. Will this person fit into what we do? Are they willing and able to be a member of a team? Will they participate in discussions? Okay, one of the companies I've told you I've worked at before, Corel, one of the managers who reported to me hired somebody and was convinced this was the perfect employee for the job and that this guy was going to take over when she left, and she was super confident that this guy had all the skills, and she wanted me to go in on the final interview, which was common at the time. I'd go in on the final interview. I always left the decisions up to them unless it looked really awful. And I walked out of the interview and I said, yeah, that guy seems good, but it is your call as to whether or not you want to hire the guy. And this gentleman came in and talk about a complete corporate culture shock. He was so bad. He brought down the productivity of people he'd never even met. He was so bad that His entire team was completely frustrated, including his manager. Everybody else on the team was frustrated because they were doing a good job and he wasn't. Those people went and had lunch with their friends who were in other parts of my team who had nothing to do with this guy, and they were complaining so much about this guy. Productivity went down across multiple teams from a single individual because he did not fit the right corporate culture. His wife worked at the company and she was a rock star. She didn't work for me, she worked for somebody else, but she was a rock star. I had to fire this guy after 2 weeks. She never spoke to me again. She was still a rock star. She never spoke to me again. Okay. Corporate culture. It's important. Okay. What else? When the skills aren't available, we can train. We can train skills. We can do that. We can train you to be a better public speaker. We can train you to get better at Excel. We can train you to get better at telephone selling. Okay. What's difficult to train is culture or teamwork. So, what else? Select employees who will be productive. Basic application process involves 5 steps. Filling in the application forms. Sometimes that includes a resume, cover letter, actual forms at times. We conduct initial interviews, follow-up interviews. Sometimes we have tests. We do background investigation. Sometimes that means calling references. Maybe it involves a police check. And we have probationary periods. Okay, or some variation of the above. Okay, anybody ever been on a probationary period? Okay, what does that mean? That means you're on probation for usually anywhere from 3 to 6 months. It can be longer, it can be 9 months or a year. And if it's not working out from a company perspective, they can get rid of you and say, hey, thanks for coming. They don't have to give you a reason. Hey, you didn't make it through your probation. We appreciate your effort, but it's not working out. Adios. Okay. So that said, what I'm going to do is stop it here. And then I will pick it up in the next class to continue on. Sound good? So we're going to end at chapter